Touch and feel.
How is it there's somebody trying to call in, somebody's phone is buzzing?
Oh, I get it. Been getting texts. Oh, you don't even like the buzz?
It's okay.
2023. This is the regular board meeting of SAM, and we're starting the meeting at 7:05. Let's have a roll call vote. A roll call, please.
Director Clark.
Here.
Director Decker.
Here.
Director Penrose.
Here.
Director Roddick.
Here.
Director Dye.
Here.
Chair Slater Carter.
Present. And Jeremy, if you could do the introduction with the fact that Director Roddick is home ill and not present at the meeting, but in person, but present at the meeting in digits. So.
Absolutely, happy to. Director Roddick meets the qualifications of AB 2449, even though she'll be participating remotely via Zoom. A director who meets the qualifications of AB 2449, even if it's not posted on the agenda for the remote location, can participate up to twice per year for a good cause. She is ill and therefore meets the qualification to do so, and she'll be participating as a regular voting member of the board this evening.
Thank you.
Yes, I just want to report that I have a very bad cold, including a cough and a runny nose, and I may be, contagious. And believe you me, I'd rather this not be happening, and I'd rather be there in person because I'm about to go on vacation and I want to be healthy when I go. So.
Get well quick. So moving into item 2, public comment, oral communication for items not on the agenda. Do we have any? I don't see any hands up on the board. Do we have any in the public with their hands up? I don't see any. Okay, then we will move on to the consent agenda. Item A, the minutes approve the minutes of May 8th, 2023 at the regular board meeting, approve the disbursements for May 22nd, 2023 attached, monthly revenue and expense report for period ending April 30, 2023 attached, and status of CIP projects for 2021, 2022, and 2022, 23 also attached. Do we have a motion? Does anybody want to pull
I'd like to make a comment, and I'm going to pull 3D, the status of CIP projects, to ask a question. My comment is, I think that the CIP projects don't belong on consent. We have numerous of those going on. They're time sensitive and quite expensive, and the brief table summary that we get doesn't give very much information. I think the CIP project should be a regular agenda item.
I agree with that. Thank you.
Just for a procedural thought here, would it make sense to approve the other items on the consent calendar and then circle back to
item
D? Yeah.
Yes. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move that we approve item 3A, 3B, and 3C.
Second.
A motion by Director Penrose and a second by Director Clark. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Moving on to regular business. Item A, presentation.
I pulled item 3B.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so we should probably discuss, I don't know if there's an extensive
Can we
discussion, but
move that after first?
No, it's a pretty simple question, actually. On page 44, item 4 in this table is backup electric power generator. Is that the same thing as the generator we're discussing under the budget item? How many generators does Sam have?
Director Clark, the item mentioned in the CIP is a backup electric power generator, which is a portable power generator, which is of lesser capacity, like 110 kilowatt, and that can run only the aeration basin and the blower, while the item in the budget is the generator at the treatment plant, which is about 800 kW, which runs the entire plant.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
No problem.
Kishan, what action are you asking? Is just receive and file as to the CIP report?
Yes, this is just for information. It's not for approval.
So why is it on consent? Okay, I mean.
That's why it's on the consent.
Just for information,
Yep.
because we don't have a just for information section.
I see.
Moving on to regular business then, item A, presentation of first flush report.
Do we have to pass item 3B?
It sounds like we don't. I mean, if you do anything, you just do a receive and file.
Okay.
You could vote on receive and file if you want to, but
I don't think there's any.
That's great.
it doesn't sound like
It was said it was just for information.
Great.
By San Mateo Resource Conservation District. And the report is attached, and I look forward to hearing more. Thank you.
Yep. So we have staff from RCD along with us, and they would be making a presentation on the first flush report. And I have Noah and Grace. And Grace, I think you can go ahead and start your PowerPoint. I presume Callie has already given you the control.
Awesome, thank you.
Did you have the control? Oh, good.
All right, can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. So I am Grace Allen, and I'm a water quality project manager with San Mateo Resource Conservation District. And today we're going to go over the first flush 2022 water quality results. So just a brief overview of what we're going to go over is the RCD itself. What's a watershed? What is the first flush event? Why do we sample? What do we test for? And what did we find this year? So we're the San Mateo Resource Conservation District. So a little bit about us is that we're a special district of government that helps people help the land by providing confidential, non-regulatory technical assistance. And we have 5 main areas, which include water, climate, wildlife, agriculture, and fire and forest health. So Noah and I are a part of the water quality team. So on the left is a schematic of what a watershed is. So it's an area of land where all of the water that falls in that area will be drained to one spot. So for us, we have small coastal watersheds. So that's the ocean. And then on the right is the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. And for Santa Cruz, Monterey Bay, and San Mateo, we have the first flush program because our watersheds drain to the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. So what is first flush? It's the first big rain event of the wet season where contaminants that were on land can be washed into the ocean. So you can imagine that it's going to be one of the worst water quality days of the year. And why do we sample first flush? It helps us identify what pollutants are of concern and where. And it provides insight on how water quality is changing over time at various sites. And we cannot do this without our volunteers because it is a community science volunteer event. So the volunteers sample along the San Mateo coastline that feeds into that Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. And a big shout out to them because they get trained to sample and then they are on call and then they brave the weather and the weird times to sample along the coastside. So we really appreciate them. We couldn't do it without them. And those samples we then analyze to see what the water quality is on the worst quality day of the year. And we also cannot do this program without our partners and sponsors, such as Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, Sugar Authority, Midcoastside, San Mateo County Harbor District, Surfrider Foundation, City of Pacifica, and County of San Mateo. So a big shout out to all of you. Thank you so much. So what do we test for to assess the water quality in the area? And I'm going to go into greater depth about all of these later in the presentation. So we look at fecal indicator bacteria, nutrients such as nitrates and orthophosphates, metals like copper, zinc, and lead, total suspended solids, and for the first time this year, pyrethroid pesticides. And then on the map to the right is all of the sites that we sampled this year. And it ranges from Pacifica down to Half Moon Bay. So one of our main pollutants of concern is fecal indicator bacteria. And these are really important because it indicates that there could be human health risk in the water. And it's the one that shuts down beaches. So we test for E. coli and Pterococcus, and it can come from the feces of warm-blooded animals. So this could be humans, pets, or wildlife. And again, this indicates that there could be pathogens in the water that could harm human health. Another pollutant that we test for are nutrients, such as nitrates and orthophosphates. And this can come from fertilizers, pesticides, detergents, failing infrastructure of laterals and lines, and poorly maintained septic systems. And so the nutrients can cause excess nutrients in the water can cause eutrophication, which can cause algal blooms, and then eventually might cause hypoxic water and fish kills. The next pollutant are metals. So this can be copper, zinc, and lead. And this can come from gutters, roofs, wearing down brake pads, industrial waste, paint, and fire. So this could cause human health risks and reduce reproduction of marine mammals. We also tested for total suspended solids, which can come from construction, erosion, agricultural runoff, and fires. So these can reduce the water column visibility and can also have other pollutants adhered to the solids. So for the first time, we tested for pyrethroid pesticides. And these are a group of synthetic pesticides, which mimic the naturally occurring pyrethrum found in chrysanthemums. And so at the top right, you can see a list of all of the pesticides in that group. And most of them were non-detected, except for pendimethalin. And again, that was only at one site. So now we're going to go over the 2022 first flush results. So starting off with, the fecal indicator bacteria. This is a graph of the E. coli concentrations at a 1 to 100 dilution at all of the sites that we tested. So the water quality objective for E. coli is 320, most probable number, out of 100 milliliters. And that red dashed line is the water quality objective. So you can see that most of the sites were above the water quality objective, and only 2 were within the recommended ranges. And this might look a little daunting, but again, this is the worst water quality day of the year, so it's not surprising. And San Vicente Creek and Martini Creek both were within the recommended ranges, which is really great news, especially for San Vicente Creek, which has historically been a beach bummer. And, if we look at the historical first flush data, San Vicente is the thick orange line there. And again, the red dashed line is the water quality objective. So for historically, it's been above, but for 2021 and 2022, it's been within recommended ranges. So that's really, really exciting to see. And it especially on first flash, which is the worst water quality day of the year. Moving on to metals. All sites met the water quality objectives for zinc and lead, which is again great news. And then the graph to the left is copper concentrations in 2022. And the red dashed line is the water quality objective of 30 micrograms per liter, and 4 out of the 13 sites exceeded the water quality objective. And so these are the historical lead concentrations. Then we just wanted to point out that the yellow thick line is Vassar drainage. And for the years of 2017 to 2020, it had an upward trend that we wanted to keep an eye on, with it peaking in 2020 above the water quality objective. So we wanted to make sure that that wasn't a chronic issue. And so based on the data from 2021 and 2022, it does not appear to be a chronic issue at that site. And then for nutrients, orthophosphate had 8 of the 13 sites exceed the water quality objective, but it seems to be at a lower magnitude than prior years. And then in the graph to the left, you can see the nitrate concentrations for 2022. And again, the red dashed line is the water quality objective of 2.25 milligrams per liter, and 2 of the 13 sites exceeded the water quality objective. And this was the first year that we tested for pyrethroid pesticides, and only pendimethalin was present at 1 site. And pendimethalin is a selective herbicide used to control broadleaf weeds and grassy weed species. And it has a low human health risk, but is a possible carcinogen. And environmentally, it may adversely affect plants, invertebrates, fish, and birds. So overall, San Vicente Creek was within recommended ranges for E. coli for 2 years in a row, which is a great sign, and we hope to see that in the future. Zinc, lead, and total suspended solids were within recommended ranges at all sites. Orthophosphate had 8 of 13 sites outside of recommended ranges, and nitrate had 2 of 13 sites outside of recommended ranges. And then for the first year, we analyzed samples for 12 pyrethroid pesticides and only found 1 at 1 site. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you letting us speak to you. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask now or contact myself or Noah at those emails. So thank you very much.
Deborah.
Yes, a couple of questions. What were the conditions that made San Vicente such an improvement the past 2 years? Was that work that RCD did, or?
I can answer that one, Grace. Hi, everyone. I'm Noah Katz. I manage the water quality program at the RCD. So I think it's a combination of factors. We have a long-term monitoring project on San Vicente Creek. So every about 10 times a year, we collect water samples, half in the dry season, half in the wet season. So we have other data to corroborate things are improving there. And I think in terms of what's improved it, I think it's a combination of operational and structural BMPs up on the equestrian operations on the upper portion of San Vicente Creek, and then also work in the lower county portion as well. So I think it's no one thing, but just many years of a bunch of different people trying hard to clean up water there. So
Great. Next question was, where does the copper come from?
Grace, want to take that one?
Yeah, it comes from the wearing down of roofs and brake pads and other sources of metal, I think. No, are there other ones that you come to mind for you?
I think the main one is just related to automobiles. So there are a number of things on your car that can basically leach heavy metals into the environment. Brake pads are probably the best example of this. And I think brake pads are actually made of a combination of metals, so I'm not sure if it completely explains the problems of copper. But essentially, when you tap your brakes in your car, it's going to grind the metal against metal, and that's going to leave these tiny little kind of microfilaments on the ground. And we'd expect after a long dry season like we had in 2022 that that first big rain would wash a lot of that into storm drains and creeks and out into the ocean.
Great, thank you. Last question is nitrates were really out of excessive at one site in particular. What was that site and why were they excessive there?
What was the name of that site? Grace, sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, let me
Which
find that real
beach was
quick.
it? Thank you.
That was at Naples Beach Discharge Outfall.
Yeah, Naples Beach. So not entirely sure why that was so high. Something that we're investigating. But the way that we work the RC, so we're non-regulatory, so we don't need to get anybody in any kind of trouble. So if we basically, we're gonna look into that and find a source and reach out. If we find an issue, reach out to landowners and see if we can provide technical assistance. But we're not
Great.
sure where that's coming from right now.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Matthew?
How much rain does it take to become the first major rain event?
So in Half Moon Bay, we wait for a minimum a tenth of an inch of rain, which is enough to get sheeting and overland flow. But it's not an exact science because we then need we need it to continue raining so we have time to get our volunteers out there. So minimum a tenth, and then it can be really tricky actually making that call because we need to give volunteers time to drive out there and that kind of thing. And last year, actually, September, if y'all remember, we got those really big storms early on, and it rained like 2 inches north, 2 inches south, and 4 inches east, and it just didn't rain down at Pillar Point Harbor at all. It was a really weird rainstorm, so that complicates things. But yeah, short answer is a tenth of an inch, and then we need a little bit more to get people out there so they can sample before it stops raining.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any more questions? I don't see any.
Greg.
Oh, Greg, there you are. And Sid to follow Greg.
Yeah, Noah, good to see you again. Grace and Noah, I don't know if you're aware, but we had severe stormwater problems out here this year. Not only was the sewer plant affected, but I had neighbors who are now living elsewhere because their homes were flooded and they had to move out due to mold. And I have some surfer neighbors who reported that the ocean was as brown as they'd ever seen it following these rainfalls. And it's anecdotal reporting, of course, but they also reported it wasn't that way up in Pacifica, which I found strange. So my overall question is, if we're monitoring water quality, and you don't have to answer it here, this could be a follow-on correspondence. It seems that we had a lot of pollution coming out, especially from buildings that were damaged, right? And building materials and who knows what, mold or whatever. So my question is, when and how do we assess the water quality from the major storms like the ones we just had this year? And again, you can get back to me if you want. I appreciate what you're doing is establishing a baseline for consistent measurement. But I think we had a more severe problem than normal, and I don't know how we're going to catch up to measuring. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Yeah, like you mentioned, this is really baseline monitoring. We do like really targeted monitoring for source identification, for fecal indicator bacteria, Pacifica, San Vicente Creek, some in Pillar Point Harbor, and we do some other monitoring further down south for sediment and dissolved oxygen and some other estuary stuff. I want to think about your question and get back to you, but I would guess that Pacifica had just different watershed, more urbanized, less turbid, and down here with down Half Moon Bay, all the way down to Pescadero Butte now, it's a lot more rural. Even you saw Pilarcitos even a couple weeks ago, looks like bad coffee almost. I think just must be the geological makeup and the kind of percentage of urbanized cover would be my guess right off the bat. But that's just kind of a stab in the dark. I do think, a lot of pollutants washed off the land into the ocean at that time. And the stuff that we look at when we look at it, and we didn't look at it during the storms, but I'm sure it was high. I would say just a reminder, for all of you out there that go surfing or swimming or whatever at the beach, just a reminder, wait a couple of days after it rains. Because, I don't know if there's any kind of constructed solution that would solve I'm sure the water quality problems you saw visually this winter. So just a reminder.
Carlisle.
Sorry, I couldn't find my unmute. I think I volunteered last year, but I don't know why. It seemed to be raining really hard at the harbor when I was volunteering, so maybe they postponed it to a later date or something. But anyway, maybe I missed a year. Do you know when it's going to be this year? Is it usually in the fall?
Yes. So last year we had. Thanks for your question. Last year we had a false start, basically, and so when you were volunteering with us, and thank you for doing that, we did get rain. It was like a week, or well, I think it was 3 days later. Actually, we did get a storm that hit in Half Moon Bay and Blue Point Harbor. And when will first flush be this year is the $1 million question. I would assume October, but
okay.
But predicting the future, we will have a training end of August. Another training for volunteers who are interested in participating this year, and yeah, we actually used to have a slide in the results presentation when it's first flush, and we cut it out this year. It did seem to be moving later and later and later. If anyone remembers 2 years ago, I think it was the day before Thanksgiving, or maybe 4 years ago, and I actually had to personally call volunteers and basically beg them to come out the day before Thanksgiving. And then I think the following year maybe was like early December, and then this 2022 was what, September, late September, I think. So.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
One other quick question. I didn't see Montera Creek on there, but I did see it on your data map, and it looked like you're sampling uphill and not right by the beach. So is there a chance you're ever going to sample right at the mouth of the creek where it hits the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve? It's right below the lighthouse.
We've had trouble finding kind of a safe place to send people down there.
Yeah.
For Montera Creek was the only issue why it's not included. And another reason why we have that kind of upper, it does stand out from the other sites, that kind of upper Montera site, is just people were curious about the water quality in that area. I think there was a number of years ago that was concerned about pet waste in that area. Yeah. And so we responded to requests and added that to the program. And I'd love, if you know of another way down, maybe please let us know. We'd love to get sampled at Creek Mountain.
Well, I think unfortunately the youth hostel's been closed. There might be a way down through the Montera Water and Sanitary District property, but I'm physically not the one to go down there.
Sure.
I mainly wanted to know because their Mid-Penn Housing is planning to build a 71-unit complex right at the 16th and the creek. And one of their documents said that they would let stormwater flow into the creek. And I'm like, what? That goes right into the Marine Reserve. So it'd be great if you guys could sample it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more comments? Okay, I will make a comment. I was driving around looking at storm conditions in El Granada and in Montera and watching the ocean. I've lived here for over 40 years, and it was some of the muddiest water I have ever seen. I agree with the surfers. And what I observed is Granada, even the water that runs into a drain pipe is carrying a lot of sediment and mud with it, and it runs straight into the ocean. The county doesn't even have on any of these sites flows to ocean. Do not put oil. Do not put that. It's on their water permit, and they haven't even done that. They should be planting grasses and making serious efforts to make some wetland kind of percolation basins to clean the water up to catch that kind of stuff, and they're not. So hopefully RCD will get this message to the county because, and frankly, I think RCD should look at the Midcoast Community Council report on stormwater that's coming out. It will be a very complete stormwater, and it will give you a whole lot of background information as to why you're seeing what you're seeing. So thank you, Barbara.
Quick comment. I know that in other areas, those are great scout projects. Yep. To stencil the warnings on the storm breaks. Yep. Satisfying, good for the environment, everything else.
And it uses latex paint too.
Yeah, they're very good. They do. So,
Okay, moving right on
that'd be-
to item B. Yes,
Oh, so that'd be something the RC would be super happy to work on.
Cool.
Work with whoever on, signage for storm drains. Absolutely. Maybe that's something we can partner with Sam on, or the county, or a bunch of organizations. Would be great.
thank you. Let's move on regular business to B, authorize general manager to issue a purchase order to RF McDonald Inc. for the supply and install of boiler at sand plant in the amount of $226,163.
Before I get on to this item, I'd like to thank Noah and Grace for their presentation. And thank you very much, RCD.
Thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Moving on to the item on the agenda for the... Thank you. Moving on to the item on the agenda for the boilers. Sam plant has 2 hot water boilers, and they are basically provided to keep the digester sludge at a constant temperature. Typically, it is 95 to 96 degrees Fahrenheit, and this allows the microbes that break down the fecal matter to function properly. Now, we do service these boilers every year, and this time when we serviced the boilers, we found that the boiler number 1 was out of compliance. It so happened that the Bay Area Quality Management District was also checking it out, and we found that the boiler number 1 was polluting above the acceptable limits. And therefore, Bay Area Quality Management has prohibited SAM from using boiler number 1. So that means we have only 1 boiler. At any point of time, we use only 1 boiler, but the other boiler is a redundant boiler. But the present situation is that we do have a boiler number 2, which is functioning, but which is also getting pretty close to its limit. So the contractors that service these boilers have informed that they cannot bring the boiler 1 to the required level of performance, and that we need to buy a new boiler. And that's why this proposal is brought to the board for approval to replace boiler number 1. And as you all know, due to the supply chain management issues, we do have a long lead time for the supply of boiler number 1 for the new boiler. And that's going to be at least 4 to 5 months. It has been brought to the board today to take a decision, although this item has also appeared in the budget for the next year, but we need to place an order in this fiscal year. Staff is here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the board? I see none. I see no hand raised.
I move approval.
I'll second.
Thank you. Motion by Director Ruddick, second by Matthew. All those in discussion? Barbara?
well, we're going to authorize the expenditure as part of the budget. Is that right?
So the budget?
It's gonna, I mean, it's included in the list. This was added. I'm just a little confused. Again, how can we authorize it without addressing where the money's gonna come from to pay for it? I'm totally supportive of doing this. It just seems like a little backwards that we say, yes, do it. Sounds like the federal government actually, and debt limit. We say, yes, we should do this. And then we haven't authorized the money to pay for it. So maybe we should have the budget discussion and then come back and authorize the expenditure.
Just a point of clarification, it looks like is project 2 the same under infrastructure for, looks like 0.5 million? Rehabilitation.
Yeah, and you just said 226 and it's 0.5 in the proposed budget. Let me make it clear. I think we need to replace the spoiler. I'm not in any way objecting to doing it. I'm just wondering about the correct process.
Kishan, could you explain this?
Yes, the reason I've brought this as a separate agenda item is because what has been happening in the past 2 months, two meetings that the budget doesn't get approved. We would like this item to get approved, and that's why I mentioned it, saying that it is not budgeted in the 22-23, but it can be brought as a mid-year budget adjustment for 22-23.
So if
as
we
of-
did that, then we take it out of the proposed budget for 23-24?
You can take it out partly because what we put in the infrastructure budget is 500,000, and this proposal is for 226,163.
And what's the difference? Why do you
The
need
difference-
it?
The difference is that if you pass the budget with whatever has been indicated, then part of that amount will be paid for this boiler, and we do not need a mid-year budget adjustment.
But you just said it.
But if you did not, wait a second, if you do not pass the budget, and if you do not want to pass this item, then we are back to square one. We would still be operating with boiler number 2, which is in a total risk.
So what is the $500,000 compared to the 226? I'm not, questioning that we need it. I'm just trying to understand what it is. Is it 226, or is that 2 new boilers, or is that installation, or what is the difference between the 226 and the 500,000?
The difference is the 500,000 includes the 226,163 for this boiler, plus the remaining will be for refurbishing the boiler number 2.
But is boiler number 2, it sounded like you just said it's close to its limit. It'll be okay if it gets refurbished, or it needs to be replaced? And if it costs 226 to replace boiler number 1, couldn't we replace both of them for 500,000?
Yes, we can do that, but it all depends on when the budget gets approved and what the price will be for the new boiler at that point of time. As of now,
Can we come back and address this after we talk about the budget? Because if we approve it as part of the budget, it sounds like you don't need this vote.
well, that's why I've been mentioning that it's a mid-year budget adjustment for 226,000 if you approve this item on the agenda.
Debbie?
Confused.
We need to do this.
Yes, I agree.
I don't see any reason to quibble over the timing of tonight's meeting to do it. We've had the budget, we've had a chance to review it. This is necessary. I say we just take the vote and get this over with.
Yeah, if you wish, directors, once you approve the budget, you can reduce the 500,000, which is in the infrastructure, by 226,000, and then pass the budget if you intend passing it at the point of time.
So it's 726,000 total that's needed.
No.
Subtract. The 226,163 is the number in the RF McDonald.
Right. And I'm supportive of this. I'm not quibbling about doing it. Let me make that clear. But if we approve this now, we haven't approved, we either have to do a budget adjustment and have a second vote, or we have to include it in the budget. Is that the situation? So if we approve it tonight without a budget adjustment, or including it in the next year's budget, where does the money come from?
It's not getting paid until next year. So if you approve this item on the agenda, and if you do not approve that item in the budget, if the budget does not get approved, then I will bring it back to the board for a mid-year budget adjustment of the 22-23 budget at a later date. It doesn't have to get paid now. It doesn't have to get paid until next year. But we have to place an order soon enough so that we have the delivery lead time of 4 to 5 months.
Sid?
Thank you.
Clear?
Keishan, I think I understood that you said that we're operating on 1 now instead of the usual 2. Is that right?
That's actually not right. So we operate always on 1 boiler. The other one is a backup.
Okay, so this is like going, using your spare without the flat being repaired at the moment, unless they approve it. And it's just approving it to order it. It's not going to get paid for till next year because you have to wait till it shows up because of supply chain. Is that my understanding?
That's absolutely right. And at that point of time, when we have to pay the vendor for the equipment, and if the budget does not get approved at that point of time, then we would go for the mid-year budget adjustment of a 22-23.
Thank you.
24.
Yeah.
Well, never mind.
Sorry,
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I think you guys should order it and stop fiddling around, but that's for you guys to decide.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Peter, has your question been answered?
Oh, yes.
I
Thank
have
you.
one question, you actually asked the question, Barbara. You said 500,000, Keishan, and that the remainder after the 226,000 for the new boiler was to refurbish boiler number 2. But that seems to me to be a lot of money to refurbish something when it costs about the same to buy a new one. So I'm a little confused on that.
I had sent a similar comment already by email to Keishan before. I said, why don't we buy 2 new boilers
Yeah.
instead of refurbishing the second one?
The board
Yeah,
could
but-
make a decision to that instead.
Yeah, keep in mind, directors, that the budget is only an estimated one. So when I have to buy the new boiler for the second one, I don't know what price it would be at that point of time. Then I could bring it back to the board for either a refurbishing or a new boiler.
Thank you. Let's vote on.
Why don't we approve the 500,000 in the budget and ignore 2 of them now
Yeah,
at this
good
price?
idea.
Let's do the budget.
Keishan, do you think we should order 2, or is there a rationale, an operational rationale for refurbishing 1?
My suggestion is we go ahead and order for boiler 1, and we are discussing with the boiler supplier for refurbishing boiler 2, because we have made some modifications in boiler 2, which should not be that expensive. It will probably be 150,000. That's the best guess. We have changed the burner, we have changed the panel over a period of time. So maybe we might be able to get away with just refurbishing rather than buying a new boiler.
So your 500,000 is a not to exceed.
Yes, it's always, the budget amounts are always not to exceed, and it'll always be brought back to the board for approval once we get the actual price.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, but I'm still coming up with numbers that don't make any sense to me. 226,000 for a new boiler, 150,000 to refurbish an old boiler. What's the
Correct.
savings there? Why not get 2 new boilers?
I agree.
Perfect, agree. So if the board would like to approve today for 2 boilers, then we are fine.
Okay, but we have a motion on the table.
I'm willing to amend my motion to include 2 boilers.
Thank you.
I second.
Thank you, Peter. So motion from Director Ruddick and second from Peter Decker. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion to purchase 2 new boilers for a not to exceed of $500,000 is made and passed.
There's no opportunity to comment, but I would say that, just want to clarify that this will either be paid for by a budget adjustment this year, which we, by ordering these, are committing to, or
Right.
including them in next year's budget. That's
Right. All right, now I heard after the last closed session that the board wanted to go into closed session to discuss a few things before we discuss the proposed general budget for fiscal year 23-24. Is that still the case?
Yes.
I hear one aye. What about the rest of the board?
Yeah, it's really chair's discretion.
Should we get the public to come forth with any questions or comments on the budget?
The problem we have is, it was such a, to use a Michigan phrase, a soup sandwich, trying to get back into general session after splitting out the public. We don't really have the technology experience and maybe even all the necessary apps to be able to do that. Maybe, is there a way, if we wanted to have a short closed session, we could leave the Zoom on its own and all go into Keishan's office and sit around the table so that the folks who are waiting don't have to get off and wonder when we're coming back?
Well, we have Debbie on Zoom.
I'm okay to talk budget in open session right now.
Okay, so we have 1 and 1. I'm looking for Peter. What's your?
Let's discuss it first in open session. We can always then go into closed session.
Okay,
What was the topic that we were going to go into closed for?
I don't know. I was out of the room.
Oh.
I did hear that if somebody wanted to go back into closed session, so.
Yeah, it just, the budget bears upon, two pieces of pending litigation, and the resolution of the current impasse over the budget does touch upon those, but you certainly could talk about these things in open session. There's nothing wrong with that.
Let's do open session.
All right, let's just discuss the budget in open session then. Moving right on then to item 4C, discuss proposed general budget for fiscal year 23-24 and authorize the general manager to submit it to the member agencies for approval. Keisha.
Okay. Yes, I have the same budget which I have presented the past 2 meetings, except that I made a minor change in the infrastructure, and I've added 2 more projects to the infrastructure budget if for the benefit of the public. That we have we have decreased the budget amount for the Montara Force Main and added 2 projects. One is the boiler and the other is the emergency generator at SAM plant. But the total for the infrastructure budget is still $3.5 million. So staff is here to answer any questions, and yep, that's it.
Okay, do we have any comments from the public before we close the public hearing? Greg.
Well, I would like to clarify one thing before I make my comments. My understanding is that there's something on the order of 10.5 million over a period of 3 years for this project, with the potential for an extra million or so if we change the diameter of the pipeline. And you're asking for about a third of that to be in this coming budget. Is that understanding correct, Kishan?
Yes, I've asked for $2 million out of the 10.686 estimate.
Okay. Okay. Well, for one thing, as background, we have other health and safety issues here that I was hoping to work productively with Half Moon Bay on in the coming years, most especially including the telecommunications and the need for reliable fiber. And I believe I have general interest from the council at Half Moon Bay to work together on improving our essential telecommunications infrastructure. So I'm hoping for a collaborative outcome to this. But I wanted to just frame a couple of things as background. Here's a quote from a May 17th, 1976 meeting up in Montara when the county and government was pressuring Montara to give up its sewer plant and join in the SAM venture. Mr. Robert Magnasco was appalled that a sewer plant functioning at 50% of capacity would be abandoned and the raw sewage would be pumped 9 miles for treatment. But that's what we ended up doing. We ended up having Montara get rid of a perfectly good sewer plant and join in this enterprise. Secondly, there's a quote that I cannot name the author of, but he is still living founder of the Montara district. And what he said was, in 74, we got 7/8 of the money from the Clean Water Act, but we forgot we'd have to replace the plant. And that comment is unfortunately true nationwide, as my research has shown. And I've published articles on the infrastructure deficits that you all face. And I've spoken to not every one of you, but each of your organizations separately. And I even gave a slideshow to the finance department of Half Moon Bay about the tens of millions of dollars you all face. The costs that are coming up now are not surprise or unanticipated. I've seen estimates for replacing the intertie pipeline system going back about 4 or 5 years in a capital budget that was presented by SAM. So I just wanted to point out, this is the way the system was designed to pull the 3 agencies together. Unfortunately, current accounting practices do not show the current replacement cost of the SAM assets on each of your books. So some people might be a little bit surprised by the amount of money that's now coming due, but this replacement was always going to happen. It's not a surprise. And unfortunately, all of us, and I mean this nationwide, are facing a huge infrastructure deficit. And if we don't pony up, we'll end up borrowing. And if we do that at today's interest rates, we're going to be paying 3/4 of the asset cost to the lenders on top of what we spend for the thing. And if rates keep going up, it'll be 100%. So I would just hope that we will get past this. It's part of the underlying architecture of the venture, and it's an essential component of having a shared sewer system. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no more hands from the public. I'd like to close the public hearing. Do we have a motion?
But there's no public hearing.
Well, I want to bring it back to the board and
Sure.
to let the public know I'm not going to be calling on anybody when it's at the discussion.
Sure.
Here.
Sure.
Thank you. So, thank you, Barbara.
Second.
So, thank you, Peter. Hearing no objections to that, we will move on to the board discussion then. Keishan, you added that you have made changes to the infrastructure. Otherwise, nothing has changed. Montera did send out a note, did vote on a resolution and send out an op-ed piece to the paper saying that if this gets drug out, they are not going to be responsible for the additional costs. In talking to engineers, the costs are going up right now with inflation and supply chain issues at about 20% a year. In discussing it with our engineers, they feel it could get done probably before January 1 of 2025. And so we'd like to see this done quickly. And we don't want to pay and are not willing to pay additional costs. Deborah Reddick.
So, see, am I unmuted? I'd like to make a motion that we move to authorize the general manager to submit the general budget for fiscal year 23-24. It says, 23-24 to the agencies for consideration. I want to make clear that this vote is under protest given the inclusion of the Montera Force Main in the proposed general budget. We make this motion with the assumption that prior to the time that the council considers this budget on June 6th, that the parties will be able to meet and discuss a stipulation regarding how we're going to manage this obstacle we have right now. And we know that Jeremy had offered assistance previously with the stipulation, and we welcome his further assistance. We want to resolve this budget cycle. We want to work with you on a resolution and move this thing forward. So that's in a nutshell what our position is. And Deborah may have additions to that, but that's our motion.
That's your motion. I'll second that.
What is your
discuss
infrastructure spending level in your motion?
3.5 million.
You're
You're on
muted.
mute,
Director
Debbie.
Reddick.
Can't hear you.
The motion is to authorize the general manager to forward the budget to the individual member agencies for consideration.
Yep,
At what level of infrastructure?
As presented.
as presented.
As presented.
Do you have the?
Yes,
Okay.
I have it
so
right
yeah,
here.
Gotcha.
But you know, but we say this too, you know, under protest. But we're hoping that we can meet and have Jeremy work with us to come up with a stipulation language that works for all three agencies in the meantime, before our council meets on the 6th.
So you are at this point supporting the generator purchase as well as money for the Montera Force Main repair?
We need the generator.
Maybe the boiler as well. There's three.
Yeah,
and the
and
boiler.
Yeah,
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more comments? Peter?
No, I think this is fine.
I think this is, I thank you, Half Moon Bay, very much. Deeply appreciated. Let's have a roll call vote, please.
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Decker,
Aye.
Director Penrose,
Aye.
Director Ruddock,
Aye.
Director Dye,
yes.
Chair Slater Carter.
Yes. Thank you. And
I'm
thank
assuming
you.
we're still going into closed session for our discussion too.
We can, why don't we go into we'll go into closed session after item 8, which when we convene in closed session, we are moving on to general manager's report.
I don't have anything specific to report. A detailed report will be presented in the next meeting. But I would like to mention that today we completed replacement of the bus duct, the project which started last year where we had the bus duct which got burned out. So we completely replaced it and it's now functioning.
Keishan, the other day when I was here, there were 5 sets of contractors working on the plant. The bus duct was one of them. What were the other 4?
The other was the headworks, the bar screen, the influent pumps, aeration basin, and Calcon doing their flow meters calibration.
So we've been really getting things
Is that
done.
aeration basin 3 or 4?
Aeration basin 4.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. 3. I'm sorry. 3.
4 is done.
So are you back in 3 and 4 or still in 1 and 2?
We just finished replacing number 3 and we still waiting for, we're gonna do it as soon as we have the possibility of doing it because the bus duct replacement was a very big job and we have to wait for that one to be completed. So probably in the next couple of weeks, we're gonna start switching to those aeration basins.
Great, thanks.
Good, thank you. Attorney's report?
It's nice to be here with you all. First time and productive meeting so far. Nothing further to report. We'll have some further discussion in closed session.
Thank you. Director
Better in person.
Oh, boy, I must look terrible.
You look great both places, but it's nice to see your face.
Thank you very much.
Okay, director's reports. I see none. Topics for future board consideration. There's an attachment. For the public, there is recycled water requested by member agencies, strategic plan workshop to be determined. Board reviews proposed 5-year CIP for 2021 to 2025. Board adopts 5-year CIP 2021 to 2025. Maintenance of equipment. That was tonight. Report on the non-domestic waste source control program, which we did. Virtual plant tour, which has been done. Training and succession planning, which will be coming up, and update records retention policy.
Comment?
Please.
I think we should start, I realize we've got a lot on the plate right now and this might take a little bit, but I think we should be looking at a 5-year CIP.
Yes.
And I know it's on the agenda, but I think it's really time to take a look at that.
Well, we might want to look at it instead of 2021
I
to
know, change the
2025.
dates.
Yes,
Let's change the dates. In other words, yeah.
that sounds good.
Are we on? What about director's reports? Are we?
We went through that, but if you have a report.
Yeah, I just want to, just a little legislative report. So the governor has agreed to support a climate resilience, wildfire, flood protection, and stormwater bond to be put on the ballot on November 2024. And there's 2 bond bills vying for acceptance in the legislature. One is a bill by Senator Allen, SB 967. that would put a bond on the ballot with a value of 15.5 billion. So the legislature is starting to talk about real money here. And there's, there's all kinds of things in it. From climate to stormwater to drinking water and floods and wildfire. So it's worth taking a look. Then the competing bond bill is Assembly 15, I think it's 1537 or 67 by Eduardo Garcia for 15.01 billion. And also has a lot of stuff on it. So usually, when the economy not doing so well and the budget not doing so well, that's when the governor and legislature usually get behind these bonds. And it may be the last one we have for is maybe as long as 10 years. So it's really important to take a good look at those bills, see what's in it, and see if there are things in it that work for us. So I think that's pretty good news. That's my report.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to convene in closed session. Let's take 5 minutes while everybody signs off, and we will come back to closed session. Let me see what it says at 8:05, so at 8:10.
Just
Yeah, that'll be a different Zoom link.
Okay, before we leave open session, I just want to make one note. There were some comments before. One of the directors had a question about the budget, and it went to all the directors, the general manager's response. So I asked, that probably needs to be posted or at least made available to the public because it's part of, it's part of the proceedings for the meeting.
Okay.
And so I asked that that be posted on the website.
Good.
Kelly is working on that. So just for those on the still on the meeting, that will be available.
Okay, and in closed session, we are going to have conference with present legal counsel on pending litigation, subdivision, government code section 549, 56.9, Ecological Rights Foundation versus Sewer Authority Midcoastside, and conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to same government code, Half Moon Bay versus Granada, Montera, and the Sewer Authority Midcoastside.
I need a quick pit stop.
Yep, I think a lot of us do.
Okay, we sign out and sign in again on a new Zoom link.